services, the crisis intervention, the in-home clinician services, everything is free to the family.
Okay, so thank you for that wonderful description. I'm just going to repeat it because I just only now turned on the record button, such as the wonderful things of technology, but all of the services that you are talking about today and all of the entities, many entities are out there that are free and low cost to families in crisis. That's really the message that I wanted to get out. You know, there's a lot of different avenues to gain support, and family partners, one of the things that we can do is we can help folks figure out who it is that they need to contact if there is a question. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you folks for the presentation, Samantha and Jessica.
Okay, so we are going to be presenting today on coping through a pandemic. Our presentation is really focused on, you know, the pandemic going on right now, COVID-19. A lot of the information we use on an everyday basis, but a lot of things have changed since this situation has been going on. So this presentation is really geared towards a lot of people, parents, teachers, school faculty, service providers. It's really very comprehensive, and a lot of the information can be useful to a lot of different people. So again, this presentation is really about the trauma that this pandemic has had on children and any public health emergencies, and different strategies to mitigate the effects of the trauma in children. Next, please. Some objectives that we have for today is to identify key factors in childhood and adolescent mental health. We're going to be defining trauma and traumatic reactions in children and adolescents. We're going to focus on achieving academic success through virtual learning. We're going to describe behavioral and emotional management strategies, and we're going to talk about safety planning and the importance of having social supports during this very difficult time. Next, please.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jessica. So really the first topic or area that we do want to cover is really to address the slight history of childhood and adolescent mental and behavioral health. There's been a lot of growing evidence to really suggest that at much younger ages, we are seeing issues regarding our youth's mental and behavioral health than actually never seen before. And as we all know, the emotional well-being of our youth is just as important as their physical health. So their good mental health really allows our children and our adolescents to really develop the resilience to cope with whatever life may throw at them, and also to allow them to thrive in numerous settings, such as our home setting, our school setting, and our community setting. But what we've seen underneath this pandemic is that often our youth are struggling to thrive now in these multiple settings, due to the unforeseen or maybe invisible circumstances that we're currently experiencing. Next, please. So in 2018, the CDC completed research regarding childhood and adolescent mental health, specifically in the areas of depression, anxiety, and behavioral health disorders. They found that 4.5 million youth aged 3 to 17 years old had a diagnosable behavioral problem. 4.4 million youth aged 3 to 17 had a diagnosable anxiety disorder, and 1.9 million youth aged 3 to 17 were diagnosed with a depressive disorder. It also showed that suicide remained the second leading cause of death amongst our 12 to 17-year-olds, and the continuous concern regarding substance use amongst our adolescent population. Now, we may be asking ourselves, why would that information be so relevant right now? And the reason being is that, as many of us may have seen in the news, and if not, this might be new information, but many federal agencies and experts are really warning an historic wave of mental health problems amongst not only our adult population, but also our adolescent population. And this new wave has been heavily linked to the conditions that the pandemic has created. Now, this current climate that we are experiencing has really been defined as potential pre-traumatic conditions, or at least conditions for psychological trauma. This particular climate has really resulted in many unsettling emotions, memories, and even anxieties that may not be able to go away on their own. Next, please. So I think it's important before we go forward to really define what a traumatic event really is. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network defines a traumatic event as a frightening, dangerous, or violent event that poses a threat to a child's life or bodily integrity. It's also important to note that these events actually vary in range of intensity, frequency, and duration. Now, listed above are numerous types of traumatic experiences or traumatic events that have been heavily recognized by the Child Traumatic Stress Network, that are traumatic experiences that our youth as well as our adult population often undergo. For example, bullying, physical sexual abuse, traumatic grief, intimate partner violence or domestic violence, and medical trauma, amongst a variety of other ones. But as you can see in the middle, disasters such as public health emergencies are actually considered to be traumatic experiences or events, such as pandemics. And that's because pandemics really create many conditions such as lack of predictability, immobility, a loss of connection, a loss of sense of time and sequence, a loss of safety, and often a loss of sense of purpose, creating some of these traumatic psychological conditions. Many of us have never even experienced a pandemic before. And with that being said, that often leaves us with no prior experience to utilize now to really negate or mitigate maybe some of the reactions that we're having during this pandemic. So again, through research, they found many age-related reactions that can be experienced during a traumatic event. So as we see for our preschool and young age children, sometimes it's a sense of hopelessness, an increasing fear. Maybe we'll see some regression in some of the skills that they have learned, such as toileting and speech. Often we'll see them trying to attempt to maybe change a negative outcome of the traumatic event. Then we have our school-age children who start to have increasing concerns about safety, not only for themselves, but for others. Maybe a preoccupation about their own actions, maybe some more reckless and aggressive behaviors. And then with our adolescents, again, that increase of fear, feeling more vulnerable, maybe being withdrawn from our friends and family, even engaging in self-destructive behaviors such as self-harm or even accident-prone behaviors. Now, it is important to note that although we may experience a traumatic event, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to exhibit these responses or these reactions. But it is important to note that youth that already had pre-existing mental health conditions, these reactions could be even more exacerbated than previously seen.
Thank you, Samantha. So one of the big changes that we've seen, obviously due to school closures from COVID-19, is the idea of remote learning. Kids are now being asked to do all of their work at home, and parents are being asked to be teachers to their children, which can be very overwhelming for both parents and students. This remote learning, we've seen an increase in children who are exhibiting anxieties, feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed. So we want to kind of give some information of how parents, teachers, school faculty can continue to work together so that we can continue to have children thrive, even while learning from home. Next slide, please. So we want to talk about refusal really quickly. This is a behavioral challenge that we see a lot come through mobile response. We had seen it when schools were open and children were refusing to go to school, and now we're seeing it as the remote learning, as children are refusing to complete their work. We want to talk a little bit about what school refusal is. So usually we see kids tantrum, we see them running or hiding from the school, lashing out. There's some signs that are not so common, such as feeling physically ill, saying, I don't really feel well, I don't want to do my work today. Feeling ill on test days, difficulty getting out of bed, refusal to engage with peers, or refusing to get on the Zoom meeting. So those are some things that we want to look for when a child is refusing school, to address it right away to ensure things don't become elevated. Some things to do when that does happen, especially for parents, is to continue to provide emotional support, have conversations with your children, really have that communication open. Ask them, hey, why aren't you doing your schoolwork? Is there something that I can do to help you? Sometimes it might be that the work is just too difficult, but they may be embarrassed to say that. So, as parents, it's really our job to understand what's going on to effectively help them. And of course, reaching out to teachers and service providers, guidance counselors, they're here more than ever to help you and your child thrive while still at home. So we have a list of, of remote learning strategies for parents. These are really geared towards parents who have now become their students' teachers. I'm going to go over some of them, some of the really key ones that myself and my team have actually come up with. We want to set a schedule. We want parents to have a schedule, set clear expectations in the home. You could possibly write these down, post them on your wall, post them in your kitchen, somewhere where your kids can see and understand that these are the expectations for the day and this is what I'm going to do. Goes along with having a morning meeting, talking about expectations, keeping communication open. Number 4, we want to use other methods of learning, not just traditional or online learning. Be engaged with your kids as much as you can when you have the time to do things, kind of thinking outside of the box when talking about education at home. For example, going outside for a science lesson or being in the kitchen for math, things that kind of mix it up and keep your kids engaged and want to continue learning so they don't become complacent. A couple other really important ones is to set up a designated space for learning, encouraging kids to kind of change out of their pajamas into regular clothes, kind of keeping that normalcy, that routine in the home. Spending some time outside, starting to get really nice out. Kids tend to learn better when their minds are clear and when they get some fresh air. And of course, we want to continue to be kind and to be patient with yourself, with your kids' teachers. This is a new area for everyone, and we're all just trying to navigate it together to make sure that our kids are thriving. Next, please. So going along with remote learning, we have seen some behaviors that come through that might not have been seen, before the pandemic has happened. Again, kids are feeling very overwhelmed and stressed, and that might bring about some behaviors that parents haven't seen before. So we want to remember that behavioral health describes the connection between behaviors and the health and the well-being of the mind, body, and spirit. And so in turn, our behavioral management strategies refer to deliberate ways that you can nurture positive behavior in children while discouraging negative behavior. So in this section, we're really going to go over some of the behavioral management strategies that we use, and in turn that some parents can use while at home. So I really like this graph. I think it explains really well the stages of behavior escalation. I'm just going to go through it really quickly. We start with the calm behavior in a child. Nothing's really going on. Everybody's calm. No behaviors are present. We move to the trigger. We sometimes see that there's a trigger that happens that really affects the child, and that's what brings on their negative behavior. It's important to kind of track these triggers and really understand what is a trigger for your child. It can be many, it can be different for other children. A common trigger we get is being told what to do, being told what chores to do, or, mom's my trigger, mom telling me to do this, that's my trigger. And that leads to the agitation. The agitation is what the behavior is. Is it verbally lashing out? Is it physically lashing out? Is it being defiant, disrespectful? Is it leaving the home? Agitation is what that behavior is. It moves to acceleration, which is kind of the continuing behavior. It usually happens when a parent or authority figure tries to intervene, and the situation can become accelerated and reach its peak. The peak is kind of the most severe behaviors. It can be considered as out of control, and kind of where that behavior ends up and what the end result of that behavior is. We don't want to get to the peak, but unfortunately, if we do, we obviously want to de-escalate the situation as soon as possible. Some things that we like to do when we're de-escalating is we have to stay calm ourselves. We can't overreact. We can't show anger or frustration. We have to be level-headed to the child to explain why they need to come down, why they need to change their behaviors. We want to take breaks during this stage. De-escalation doesn't happen in an hour. It doesn't happen in 2 hours. It can be a day process. So we want to make sure that we take breaks, make sure that we're de-escalated and that we don't escalate the situation again. In this stage is when we encourage kids to use coping skills, whether it be deep breathing, muscle relaxation. Those types of things will be addressed a little bit later on, but that stage is where the coping skills are effective. Once we come down from de-escalation, we enter the phase called post-crisis depletion. It's basically a exhaustion of the child. We're no longer in the calm stage. We're actually below that, where the child is, I don't want to say depleted, but they are. Their behaviors are have driven them to become worn out, and they're exhausted, and they're in that phase, children and parents included. And then we move to the recovery, which is where we have the discussion. We talk about the behaviors. We talk about the consequences. We talk about how we could have handled that situation better. And it's important to note that that discussion of consequences, rewards, behaviors is only effective in that recovery phase. Next, please. So in order for a situation to not become escalated, we really encourage parents to take a stand. And there's 3 stands that I've included in this slide that we find are very helpful and to kind of simply convey to your child what's expected and what's not going to be tolerated. So our first one is absolutely no. You're saying that you absolutely refuse to energize negative behavior, and you will not react with negative behavior. Number 2 is absolutely yes. You will energize positive behavior and set your child up for success. And number 3 is absolute clarity. You will maintain total clarity about rules and demonstrate fair and consistent boundaries. Praising your child, this is very important for all kids of all ages, kids, adolescents. You know, everybody likes to be praised, and it is good in fostering good behavior. Praise nurtures your child's self-esteem, their confidence, and their sense of self. It kind of lets your child know what behaviors are acceptable, and they know what you like and the behaviors that you like when you praise them, and they will continue to use those behaviors. It adds warmth to the parent-child relationship, and it makes both the child and the parent feel good. Obviously, our praises want to be geared age appropriate. So for smaller children, you can say things like, you know, terrific counting. I like the way you're using your indoor voice. I'm really proud that you're playing with your toys so nicely. Whereas with an adolescent, you can say things like, I'm really proud that you're studying your history tonight instead of going out with friends. So making sure that your praises are effective by being age appropriate. Next, please. Real quick, just a couple rewards and consequences. We want to make sure that these are used effectively when dealing with children in the home. A few just really important ones on how to use rewards. We want to set achievable goals. We want to make sure that we are not setting the child up for failure, that the goals that you're setting, you know that they're going to be able to complete. Giving these rewards regularly and consistently, following through and rewarding habits, not the good outcomes. In turn, using consequences, again, just having very few and simple rules, matching up with the consequence that you make clear to them. Again, always following through, taking away privileges and not rewards that were already rewarded by good behavior. And of course, you know, we always, as parents, know we want to choose our battles. Sometimes it's better to ignore bad behavior than to punish it. And just real quick, we've added a behavior chart, school work chart. I just find this very important, as we know kids can be very visual learners. And it's important that they can actually visualize and see their progress and see what's expected of them. You can actually see better results and better behaviors if they know, and they can actually track and see their progress in front of their own eyes. So this is an example of one. You can tailor it to whatever you need to, homework, chores, anything like that. It can be a daily thing, a weekly thing, whatever your family needs and feels like would be successful is what you can use.
Samantha, you need to unmute.
I knew that was going to
There we go.
Thank you, Jess. The second portion is really looking at emotional management strategies aside from behavioral strategies. And the reason is that emotional health is really the person's ability to accept and manage our feelings through challenge and change. Next, please. So one of the ways we can do that as a parent, as a school faculty member, and even a service provider is really supporting our youth's emotional development. Oftentimes we see the learning or the teachings of emotional development is really through the first relationship a child develops, which is sometimes a parent-child relationship. In other family systems, sometimes that starts at the child-school faculty member relationship, and other times that can be between a clinician and the youth's relationship. So the first way we would love to do this is really enhancing our youth's communication skills. Providing strong communication skills, including being an attentive listener, sharing our experiences instead of lecturing, and asking more meaningful and thoughtful questions. The second way is by building or creating an emotional vocabulary. So by stating our feelings, even providing names to feelings, because anger can have a multitude of different names to describe that, depending on the moment, depending on what's going on. Of course, pointing out nonverbal cues. About 70% of what we say is coming from our nonverbal cues, such as body language. Sometimes our body language is exuding something that maybe we're not saying to you verbally. Also, helping our youth really nurture their self-regulation. Providing opportunities for our youth to understand, express, and moderate their own feelings and behaviors. Creating a warm and responsive environment, establishing consequences for poor decisions, and trying to reduce any emotional intensity of conflict as much as possible. Of course, trying to help our teens really think more carefully about riskful or risky situations. During this time of development, because our brain is not fully developed, there's an area of our brain that is actually more impulsive and is more willing to engage in maybe unsafe risk-taking behaviors than being more safe. So having conversations about, why do you think this happened? What do you think you could do differently next time? Now, it's important to understand it's probably going to take them a long time to maybe even process that because of the delay in the development of the brain, but providing them the safe time to really come up with the best answers as possible to create that healthy conversation. And of course, maybe encouraging taking safe risk-taking behaviors. I know that sounds kind of funny, putting safe and risk in the same sentence, but finding new activities, new constructive activities that still provide the same rush. So whether that's going biking, jogging, whether that's doing a new activity such as mountain biking, whatever it may be. And of course, something to piggyback off of what Jess was saying, really paying attention to our youth's warning signs. What's happening before the specific trigger? What behaviors, what emotions are being exhibited that can give us the clear signs that we're seeing an escalation of an event to occur? But not only for us, but also teaching our youth to recognize their own warning signs. Because the best way we can actually manage ourselves is by knowing more about us. And the best person that knows the best about ourselves is, again, ourselves. Next, please. So one of the forms that we can use to respond to stress, anger, and other emotions is really through something called coping skills. Many of us in here have heard of those things before, or maybe you're already utilizing them and just don't have a terminology to put to those words or to those examples of those skills. So we're going to go over it briefly. One of them is healthy and the other one is unhealthy. So we often see healthy coping skills do not provide maybe that instant gratification that our youth are looking for. But healthy coping skills actually lead to more long-lasting positive outcomes. Some of those include exercising, communicating, healthy eating habits, maybe seeking more professional support, problem-solving techniques. Whereas our unhealthy coping skills, sometimes we see our teens or our youth going more towards those because it feels so good in the moment, but that actually leads to more long-term negative consequences. Some of those unhealthy coping skills could be engaging in substance use, maybe poor eating habits, whether it's undereating or overeating, maybe poor sleeping habits, whether that's too much sleep or not enough sleep. Now, these coping skills can be self-taught, but it's really better for us to teach them to our adolescents or model them to our adolescents. And this can often be because sometimes our youth may have not had those opportunities to find applicable skills while growing up. Or maybe they're unsure what coping skills are, or maybe they don't know how to effectively utilize the ones they had and they need to adopt them or adapt them better to their current situation. So we figured moving forward, maybe it would be a good idea to go over 2 or 3 coping skills that not only do we encourage our youth to utilize, but also research has found to be very promising in reducing anxiety, stress, and any tension that a youth may be holding on to or experiencing. So one of the number one coping skills is really deep breathing. Now, deep breathing is one of the best ways to actually lower stress in our bodies. And this is actually because breath, or breathing deeply, it actually sends messages to our brain to help calm down and relax the rest of the body. So as we all know, not only are our youth, some of them are audio learners, some of them are visual learners, others are tactile learners. So by incorporating a number of types of ways to teach them or model these types of skills, it's going to be the most beneficial for them to truly understand what we're trying to teach them or model to them. So as you can see on the screen, this are different types of deep breathing skills. We have the lazy 8, the triangle breathing, the star breathing, and the square breathing. All of them very similar. There may be a little few things that are unsimilar, but they all are for the same purpose, to really relax the body and calm ourselves. So for instance, let's look at square breathing towards the left-hand quarter at the bottom. As we can see, the start point is at the right-hand lower corner. And as we go around each side, there's a new task to follow. So while we're going up, they want us to inhale for 4 seconds. We're gonna hold that inhale for 4 seconds. Around the other corner, we're gonna exhale for 4 seconds, and we're gonna hold that exhale for 4 seconds and then repeat again. Now, it's important to note with many of these coping skills, they can't be done just once. I know a lot of times we're gonna hear our youth saying, oh, I tried it, doesn't work. Nope, on to the next one, it's not working for me. But the reason being is that we can't do it just once. We have to do it numerous times until we start getting that feel-good reaction that we want to make ourselves feel better. Next. Please.
And Samantha, I am going to hop in and just let everybody know these are some fabulous slides, and we will be making them available to participants afterwards. You have a lot of really specific tips on here, which are fabulous. So
Thank you.
Take all the notes you want, but just know that we will be sharing this and the recording following. So go ahead, Samantha.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The next skill that we've seen, or research has at least said to be very successful, is called progressive muscle relaxation, otherwise known as PMR. And this is really a set of exercises, again, aimed at helping reducing anxiety and tension in the body. And one thing we've come to learn is actually we can hold so many emotions within our muscles. So by utilizing these types of exercises, it's again releasing all that tension, all that anxiety out of our body. So as you can see on the diagram on this particular slide, again, it really shows you how to utilize PMR to the best of your ability. Every body part, or at least 10 of them, as you can see, have a different, option you can use. So for example, I'm not sure if you can see number 10, the feet, but it does say to curling your toes downwards. And as you can see on the top, you do this movement for 5 seconds to the best tension that you could possibly do. You pause or release for 10 seconds while deeply breathing. And again, this is something we need to do over and over again. Luckily, there's 10 areas in the body that show to be effective on this screen. So going through all 10 until we really start to feel that relaxation that we're looking for. Perfect. Now, challenging thoughts. Oftentimes we see our youth struggling with negative thoughts, especially with our youth that do have a high level of anxiety. we often see that we ruminate on a lot of negative thoughts, and we find it very difficult to actually remove those thoughts or create more positive thinking patterns. So through activities such as this, called as cognitive restructuring, it's really a group of techniques that people use to not only notice their thoughts, but again, change their negative thinking patterns. So for instance, on this slide in this diagram, some examples are of negative thoughts that are sometimes automatic. Everyone hates me. No one understands me. My life is terrible. This pandemic is never going to end. I'll never be able to see my friends again. So an important way to challenge those thoughts are asking challenging questions. So for instance, can I be 100% sure that this is true? What is the best possible outcome? What is a more effective way to change this? Now, again, we can't expect our youth to automatically know to ask ourselves these questions. This is where, again, it comes down to teaching and modeling. And by us asking these questions, not only is it us helping our youth to help them cope with these negative thoughts, but it's also teaching them how to change their thinking patterns, how to ask more positive thinking questions to really either moderate or change their negative thoughts that they are having. Next, please. Secondly, sense of control. I think we could all agree that from this pandemic, we have all lost a sense of control in some capacity, whether it's in our personal lives or work lives or other areas of our lives where we have lost some sort of control. And control is really one's capacity to make choices. And as an adolescent, a child, a youth, making choices provides us a sense of independency. Being able to take opportunities to do things that we want is crucial to our independency, obviously within logical and illogical limitations. So it's important to teach our youth, although we can't control these areas of our lives right now, such as predicting what will happen when this pandemic's over, such as predicting the actions of others or how others are going to react, encouraging for them to remember, what can I control now? So some of those things are, I can control my positive attitude. I can control the way I react to mom or dad, or to my school faculty member that maybe I don't agree with, or to my clinician that may be saying something that's really hurting my feelings right now. I can control limiting my social media. I can control my kindness and grace that I present myself with. Next, please. So as we've talked about adopting coping skills, again, new skills that maybe we just learned in the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or other skills that maybe that are being taught to us that I could apply to our current situation. Sometimes we don't always have that ability. And it's, to be honest, underneath such pre-traumatic conditions that maybe our youth are experiencing, sometimes we really need to think about, what can I adapt to my current situation? What skills that I previously had that I know work that I can use right now? So again, maybe exercise was my form of coping with how I'm feeling. Going to the gym, being in an after-school activity, whether it was a sporting event or some other extracurricular event. But I don't have that ability right now due to what is occurring. So for instance, exercise. Maybe I can't go to the gym, but I can go for a walk down the street. I can go for a jog. I can go on a hike or trail. Maybe conversating with my friends was a healthy coping skill. Maybe I can't do that face-to-face. Maybe I can do that virtually to still maintain that relationship that I've created, the one that's helping me cope through my emotions, just on a safer basis. And again, apply. Which coping skills do I want to apply to help me cope with my emotional needs? We're gonna learn so many different coping skills amongst our entire lifetime. Some things are not gonna work. Some things are better than others. Some things I can use in this moment that maybe I can't use in front of 20 people. So it's really finding what works for us and what is easiest and best applicable for the moment to meet my emotional needs and our youth's emotional needs. And of course, self-care, being in mental health, and especially in our organization, we are pro self-care, we believe in it. Taking the time out of the day, whether you need to schedule it, whether it's 15, 30 minutes, if you have the luxury of an hour, taking that time every day to do the things that you enjoy. Because as we've come to know with self-care, it makes us feel good about ourselves. That is when we are at our healthiest, when we are taking care of ourselves. And if we're not at our healthiest, how can we possibly assume that we can care for our youth at the same capacity that maybe we could if we were feeling good? So whether it's writing down 3 nice things about yourself, whether it's going outside for 5 minutes for a breath of fresh air, maybe it's listening to your favorite song, even if it's not the whole 4 minutes, maybe it's just the 1 minute, to really start to get those feel-good emotions coming back to us.
Thank you, Samantha. So everything that we do is really to help the child grow, to ensure that they're thriving, that their mental health is well. But what happens when these challenging negative thoughts consume a youth and they aren't able to use coping skills? They either don't want to listen, or they have so much anxiety and so much depression that they can't face changing how they feel. What happens when kids can't adapt or apply coping skills? Unfortunately, we have seen in mobile response an increase in children making suicidal statements, having suicidal thoughts due to the pandemic. Social isolation is really high right now. Kids aren't seeing their friends, kids aren't seeing their teachers, they're not seeing coaches. They feel very isolated. There's a lot of things that they can't do as kids that maybe as adults we're able to kind of do and cope better with this situation. So it's our job as service providers, as parents, as school faculty to try to prevent this tragedy from happening. To be, if we do see signs of it, to intervene as best as we can and as effectively as we can, and see if this tragedy does occur, to be that post-vention support to those who have to deal with it. Next, please. So I just want to note that this information, really good information, is coming from the School-Based Health Alliance and the National Center for School Mental Health and the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. So all this is research backed by science, by suicide prevention experts. So first, we want to be preventive with suicidal ideation, especially in children and adolescents. It's a horrible, horrible thing to think about, to think that it could happen to a child or an adolescent, but unfortunately it does, and it's our job to be as preventative as possible, even doing telehealth during the pandemic. Being as preventive as possible, we want to identify, analyze warning signs, risk factors for depression and self-destructive behaviors. We want to understand that children can be depressed, children can feel lost, isolated. They can have anxiety just like an adult can. We want to identify alternatives to suicide, and we really want to explore those coping skills that Samantha has brought up and other coping skills that we may not know that would work with a child. Some coping skills work for some, and others they don't. And that's our job to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. And it is trial and error, but it's our job to figure out what's going to be most effective for the child. Next, please. In addition to prevention, we want to be active listeners. We want to be honest. We want to have children share their feelings with us. We want to keep that communication open. Identifying who isn't a trusted adult, who can you trust to tell this information to if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you do feel like you want to end your life. We want to really stress the fact that there is no stigma around this, and that it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to not be okay and to ask for help with what you're dealing with inside your head. At Mobile Response, we intervene as soon as we have any notice of any type of suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, suicidal statements, whether if they have a plan, they don't have a plan, they have a method, they know what they want to do, they don't know, they're unsure. We take any suicidal ideation, thought, or statement very seriously, and we automatically conduct a risk assessment. I'm going to kind of go over how that's kind of changed from in-person to telehealth in a minute. But we just want to make everyone aware. We do a risk assessment. We use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale to kind of guide us in our assessment. We still do this via telehealth, either over the phone or over video. We use this to determine the appropriate level of care. For the youth, we understand that nobody wants to go to the hospital right now for screening, but we understand if the risk is heavy enough, we will have a child screened at the emergency room. We want to also understand and recognize as service providers, as parents, as school faculty, that suicide risk can fluctuate. They can have good days, they can have bad days, just like us. The risk might be high one day, low the next day. And just because it's low that day doesn't mean it can go back up and fluctuate higher. So we want to keep that in mind as well. And as always, we want to develop a safety plan with the child and the parent present. So our safety planning has not changed too much since the pandemic. We try to really stick to really focusing on what the safety concerns are, really identifying those risks. But it can be challenging. It can be tricky doing it over telehealth when you're not face to face with a child. A child might not be willing to speak with you about these things over a video, over the phone. So it's really important that we still assess as best as we can for a child's safety. We really are safety planning right now as a way to avoid the emergency room. We do want to reduce the risk of exposure to the virus. But like I said, I can't stress enough that if a child is an immediate threat to themselves or other, they must be seen by a psychiatrist, by a medical professional to rule out any type of harm or safety risk to themselves or others. We want to understand that warning signs and risks and triggers might be different during the pandemic. There's one point made in a seminar I took not too long ago that things have changed, as in ways of means reduction seen further on the screen. For example, parents are stockpiling on things. They could be stockpiling on medications. Children might have more access to medications to overdose on that they might have had before. Parents might be so overwhelmed with what's going on, they're really not focusing on keeping things kind of safe around their house. It's not meant to be on purpose or meant to harm the child, but they may not realize, like, my child's depressed, he's 15, for example, he wants to dabble in alcohol, and you have a whole cabinet of alcohol for, your use that you're not realizing that your child has access to. So just keeping in mind some of those new things that have come up since basically the quarantine or the stay-at-home order. We always want to identify social supports, both social and for crisis purposes, emergency contacts, and check in frequently with your kids more than you would. At Mobile Response with our families, with our youth, we are checking in a lot more because we know this is a very overwhelming time for everybody, and we want to make sure that parents, children, everybody is safe. So if you're a teacher, if you're a guidance counselor, try to make it a point to kind of have those check-ins with all students, but more with your higher risk population. Next. And then finally, postvention. Unfortunately, this tragedy happens with youth. A lot of youth, they have a plan, they're going to stick to their plan, and unfortunately some carry it out. So it's then our job to be that postvention support for the children and the youth who were affected by this and who maybe witnessed it or were affected by a friend or even like a parent. Children experiencing that kind of trauma is very heavy. We want to be sensitive to those who've been affected by suicide and realize that, especially for adolescents, suicide can be contagious, meaning if they see it on TV, if they experience it personally, they're at a higher risk for hurting themselves or committing suicide if they've been thinking about it. So we want to keep that in mind and be sensitive to that and kind of keep more of a watchful eye on those students or children. We want to understand the different emotions that kids can go through, being the survivor, shame, anger, guilt that they're still here and, their friend is not here, thinking maybe I could have done something to stop it, having self-blame and rejection. Some actions we really want to take is to not be judgmental. We don't want to blame, but we also don't have to provide all the answers. We may not know the answers. I mean, an adolescent committing suicide is very, very heavy. And a student or a child might just want to talk and they just want to vent, and that's okay. And we don't have to have those answers at that moment. We can just sit there and be their support and be their listener. But we do want to eventually connect them to support resources, to have them get that extra support from professionals. I've added in this slide. It's the updated Stop Teen Suicide national website. I went on it. It's absolutely wonderful. It has a lot of new information. It's very updated. So I definitely would suggest that you look over that. Another really important thing that I've learned working with kids who have suicidal thoughts, have suicidal ideation, kids who have dealt with suicide in their life, is to be careful of the language that we use when talking about suicide. We want to avoid words such as successful suicide or completed suicide. Those words are positive in nature, in turn making the suicide sound like a positive event. And it might gravitate towards kids gravitating towards wanting to go to that successful place. So we want to use terms such as death by suicide or died by suicide as when we're talking to our kids.
Great, thanks, Jess. Such important information in general, but especially due to the climate that we're currently in. And our last portion is really, again, focusing on social support. As we know, many of our youth are so used to maybe seeing their friends at school or outside of school, their teachers, their coaches, their guidance counselors, their parents constantly, and other supports such as maybe a mental health provider or a counselor. But as we know, we are really in a time where our youth may be feeling more lonely and isolated than ever, because sometimes social distancing could often hover on social loneliness. So keeping our youth engaged with others is going to make a real difference during this time. Next, please. So of course, the first social support we always find is usually from our family and friends. So this is, again, an opportunity to utilize telehealth to the best of our ability. We are now in an era that maybe we have never been before, where using these virtual platforms has become such a huge success to keep cohesiveness between ourselves, whether it's our immediate family that you can't see, your extended family, your best friends, maybe even other acquaintances that you're just becoming more friendly with. So using platforms such as Skype, Facebook Messenger, House Party, they become very creative. Many of them even have games you can even play on there to keep it more entertaining. And that kind of goes into the next thing of being creative. This is a time to use our creativity to the best as we can. So whether that's a virtual movie night, a virtual game night, or even a virtual book club, to keep things more creative and more entertaining especially for our younger children and adolescent population. And of course, maybe utilizing a family meeting, having that 1 hour every week to really come together and talk as a family to continue to keep that cohesive family dynamic alive. Because being with your family, maybe more so than you were before, that creates another level of stress that maybe you have never had before. So again, creating times that you guys can spend together that are healthy activities that everyone can engage in to really keep that cohesiveness. Next, of course, is support from our school faculty. Again, we're in a realm where public education has taken on a new platform of technology, something that maybe many of our teachers, our guidance counselors, and other faculty members have never even experienced in their careers before. So just to hit on a few points, of course, staying student focused is always our #1 priority and continues to be regardless of the platform that you're using. Taking this time now more so than ever to really connect with our students, whether that's through a 5 or 10-minute video chat, to check in with them, making sure that they're doing okay and to see what their needs are. Again, trying to promote as best as possible a life balance, whether that's a life balance between school and work, family time, and other types of balances that we may need. Through our research, we have found numerous types of parental controls, applications for iPhones and Androids. One of those being the app called Unglue. They do have a website called unglue.com or the Unglue app, and that really allows parents to take more control to really create that balance in our teens' lives, whether that's the balance of social media, the balance of getting their homework done, whatever it may that you see that they are lacking in. This particular website can try to provide you that power again to create that balance for them. Next, please. And of course, support from our school faculty, especially regarding our population of the developmental disabilities, the DD population. As we know that within this pandemic, it has created even more unique challenges than maybe we had before in providing this particular population the necessary supports. They were used to receiving different types of therapies in school, whether it was speech, occupational, language, whether it was behavioral modification or accommodations to meet their educational goals. And due to the pandemic, that has almost put a strain on providing those services, even if they are on a telehealth platform. So continuing to collaborate with all the team members per child, continuing to create accommodations that we can use in the home setting, instead of really focusing maybe on all the goals that need to meet, let's focus on the goals that we can actually meet with positive outcomes with the current situation that we're currently in. Next, please. Of course, continue to solicit input, not only from students, but also parents to see what their needs are, linking them to resources, and definitely accounting for their anxiety. Again, we could all agree the pandemic has definitely created some sort of anxiety within all of us, especially with this population, that anxiety may be at a more heightened level. So taking that into account, maintain that relationship in order to alleviate maybe some of that anxiety they may be feeling at this time. Perfect. And of course, lastly, support from our mental health organizations. One of the leaders really now in the psychology, research, counseling is really Brene Brown, who's done a lot of work on vulnerability, shame, and guilt. And I think she said it the best, in quote by her, "We don't have to do it all alone. We were never meant to." Oftentimes we feel that we're uncomfortable talking to our family and friends about how we're feeling. We feel like we don't have the supports that we need right now to really help mitigate maybe some of the behaviors or reactions we're having within this pandemic or even in general. So utilizing mental health organizations, counselors, clinicians, any resource that may be available to you to provide you that extra level of support is crucial during this time, because we want everyone to feel supported. And again, kind of piggybacking off of the program we work for, Mobile Response, again, that is a contracted program through Perform Care. If you call the hotline number, which will be provided to everybody on a resource sheet that we do have that Holly will provide in English and in Spanish, you call through this number with whatever crisis that you feel that your child is undergoing, whether it's immediate, whether it's been a long-term crisis, and that clinician on the other end will do their best of their ability to really triage you to the most appropriate program. And again, one of those programs could be Mobile Response if the youth does meet the necessary requirements for that level of care. Next. And on that final note, that does conclude our presentation. We really do appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to attend our Lunch and Learn. And I do want to leave us all with some key points from what maybe we've all learned today, whether it was knowledge, a skill, whatever it may be. But it's important to know that underneath the circumstances we currently have, our youth can experience events that could be described as traumatic. And one of those events, as we know, are public health emergencies such as pandemics. We have all come to learn how these public health emergencies can really create some stressful situations that often provide some concerning responses or reactions that can impede upon their well-being. So whether you're a parent, a school faculty member, a service provider, utilizing the skills that you've learned today or the knowledge to help mitigate maybe some of our youth's concerns is really going to go a long way in supporting them, their development, whether that's behavioral, emotional, intellectual, whatever it may be. And with that being said, we would like to open it up for questions. If there are any questions, you can use the comment box. We do have a moderator, her name is Shauna. So if anybody has any questions, we could definitely try to answer them to our best of our ability.
Wow. All I can say is, this is a 60-minute lunch and learn, but I wish we could take you all on a weekend retreat and spend a little bit more time on your slides. You really packed a lot of very meaningful, very specific practical tips and suggestions. So I can't thank you enough. And as I said, we will be sharing these slides and the recording, because I think too, a lot of your comments above and beyond or explaining the handouts are really very helpful. I'm seeing a lot of very informative presentation. Thank you for your time, comments. Your moderator can jump in if I'm missing something, but I'm struck by how widespread the information is as far as how many different things that we need to look at, not only in the health of our youth, but in our own health. I mean, I was pleased that you were highlighting self-care, that you were
Definitely
pointing out that many of these challenges that the youth might be facing, we ourselves are facing. So sometimes it's really hard to help those around us when we're all feeling the stress, right, of this new normal. I think I can't wait to go back and see which was my favorite slide, because I had a couple.
thank you.
Well, we appreciate it. And I want to say myself and Sam really worked together to present this information, but a lot of this presentation was come up by our entire mobile team. Most people had input into what they had to say. So I want to give a shout out to my team for all your support and all the information that you provided to us. It was very helpful.
Well, it's interesting to me, and I see comments that were in the chat box, that everyone who has registered for this program, I have your email and it will be sent directly to you by Monday latest, probably. And I just think it's interesting to me that I think even myself being in this field, I was surprised at the breadth of your presentation of, it's such a big multi-level process, right? It's not just about crisis. It's about what happened that led up to the crisis and understanding what might have led up, and also understanding the behaviors that we see. So I don't see any specific questions for you guys, but you've given us so much, so many tools and so many things to think about. I cannot thank you enough for being here. And let's see here. Somebody's acknowledging that self-care also includes sleep. That's a wonderful point, right? Challenging the team. I think I'm reminded that in times of war, sleep deprivation is a form of torture, and there's many reasons that we might not be sleeping, whether we're worrying about loved ones or job opportunities or what that might be. But Samantha and Jessica, I can't thank you enough for the work that you do and the effort that you made to share all this great information with us, in English and in Spanish. And I will give a shout out to all of your coworkers, because you did a wonderful job of putting together a really comprehensive just list of topics and things to try. So folks, we hope to see you again at Lunch and Learn. Interestingly enough, for those of you who might have missed last week at our Lunch and Learn, the topic was suicide prevention, and you can access notes and or the recording from that presentation. We had folks from the Mental Health Association presenting on that. And I also love that a lot of your presentations, Samantha and Jessica, were very nurture heart centered. I see my friend Steve Besney there, who I know is a big nurture heart guy. I'll shout out to Margarita, our advanced trainer. But really, people, if you don't know about nurtured heart, research it. Call family partners. We will give you more information on their opportunities for classes. As a matter of fact, family partners ourselves, we offer 2 support groups a week that are taking pieces of the nurtured heart process, the nurtured heart approach, and we are helping folks kind of troubleshoot what's happening in their world and figuring out how they can control their positivity and their energy, right? Putting it on the right thing. So there's a lot of tools that are available to us. So Nurtured Heart Support Group we have every Monday night at 6 o'clock in English on Zoom, and Tuesdays at 6 in Espanol. So something to keep an eye out for. And we hope to see everybody back again, and I will send information out as soon as my team can get it together. So Samantha and Jessica, thanks very much, and everyone stay healthy.
Thank you so much. Have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks.